Hello and welcome to my wrap-up video for the 24 in 2024 challenge, which I did manage to complete. Actually, I read 27 out of 24 books that showed up on banned book or challenge book lists from around the world. I have a playlist of the 18 other videos that I've made on this topic. This event was created by MJ, Reading This Life, and the idea was to bring awareness to banned and challenged books. I know there's some controversy over the terminology. There are a number of videos that you can go and watch. Check out hashtag 24BB. In terms of banned books, I believe it's through the PEN organization. There's a definition that involves taking books off of school shelves, and that applies as a banned book because students don't always have access to going out to buy them. They may not be able to get to their public libraries. So as I say, check out all the other videos relating to this topic. I know Book Chat with Pat had an excellent wrap-up video and she read the definition. In my case, I began with 3 different videos looking at the issue itself. Video number 2 was particular to Canada, which is where I live, and video number 3 involved the United Kingdom and the United States. Other videos related to the books that I had read, the content of them. I'm still of the mind I don't really understand why so many of these books have been taken off, and as my channel page says, books encourage thinking. So I guess perhaps the thought is the less that people have available to them, the less likely they are to start thinking and putting pieces together and realizing what's going on. If you've read George Orwell, 1984, he makes that concept very clear, along with the idea of trying to rewrite history and convince the population of a certain narrative at the time. That narrative is, of course, determined by the government. As far as the books that I read, I'm not going to go back over the books that I've already talked about. Again, you can see all of those in my playlist. The final books that I'm just going to briefly mention here are Aleph, The Archer, The Devil, and Miss Prym. Those are all written by Paulo Coelho, and as I was looking into different things, those are all banned in Iran, so that's why I included them on my list. Another book that came up on the list was Goosebumps, actually the whole series there, but the one that I read was Attack of the Graveyard Ghouls. Personally, I didn't find it that big a deal. I know a number of the students when I worked in schools were reading Goosebumps. The only thing I found frustrating about this particular book is that it ends with a cliffhanger, and my library doesn't have the next book. It's like Blackwater all over again. Another book that I read that I hadn't planned to, but this came up as a running joke with my friend Ven, was A Court of Thorn and Roses, and this is by Sarah J. Maas. Her books, of course, have been a big brouhaha in Utah. She's also been removed from several schools in Florida. No surprise there. And I have to say, I really enjoyed the read. I'm not sure what the big deal is. There certainly isn't any graphic scenes that stand out in my mind. Yeah, but I very much enjoyed that read. Finders Keepers is a Stephen King book, and of course, many of his books have been removed in particular from Florida that I'm aware of. I mean, there are articles and controversy all over the place related to books. But Finders Keepers, I read. It's the second book in the Mr. Mercedes series that I've already commented on Mr. Mercedes. With Finders Keepers, I can't say it was one of the books that I personally enjoyed. It was graphic and disturbing, but again, I mean, that's up to the individual who's reading the book. And if it relates to schools, then parents should be paying attention to what their kids are reading and consuming as far as the internet. So, again, different people have different responses to books. If It Bleeds, for me, was a reread. It's, again, a Stephen King book. In this case, 4 short stories. I enjoyed them. And, I mean, the title is accurate, whether you're talking about YouTube videos, national news, newspapers, something that some people may not even be familiar with anymore. But, I mean, sadly, it's so true, isn't it? If you have that clickbait title, gruesome title, chances are people are going to read it and pay attention to it. But as far as If It Bleeds, I enjoyed the read. I enjoyed the character of Holly. There are some good stories there. Revival, another Stephen King book, and again for me was a reread. I'd read it a number of years ago. If you have issues with the afterlife, you may not want to read it. Our story follows a young boy. He and his family are very much involved with the church. A new priest comes to town with his family. There is a horrific accident that occurs, and their priest leaves after having a mental breakdown. The young boy keeps coming up into contact with this individual. Down the road, he's become a faith healer using electricity. The young boy, now a younger man, has a lot of concerns with what this individual is doing, and the story plays out from there. It's typical creepy Stephen King. Carrie, again, for me, was a reread. Initially, I read this well over 40 years ago. I enjoyed this particular read because I listened to it on audio, and it was read by Sissy Spacek, the original Carrie. I mean, there's just a lot of things to that story in terms of the telekinesis, the relationship between the mother and daughter, bullies, and a lot of choices that, instead of making things better, just sent things over the edge. The body count's much higher than Michael McDowell's The Amulet, which is a bit surprising. But as far as the story itself, again, I didn't mind the read. I read The Exorcist, I think, for the first time. I know I watched the movie, the original, and I remember the big brouhaha about the actress Linda Blair in it because of some of the scenes, and she was so young. So for me, that book brought up a lot of different memories of watching the old movie. It certainly was creepy. The read was enjoyable. There's a lot of different twists and turns. You're not quite sure how this is all going to go. What I found interesting is, when I finished reading The Exorcist, I'd also read The Omen, another reread decades later for me. I certainly remember Damien and the different events that occurred, seeing the movie as well. And I'm surprised The Omen is somehow not on this banned book list. I mean, you have a little demon child, you have a very horrific birthday party with a pretty gruesome ending for the nanny. And that's the other thing I find with this whole banned book issue. based on some of the reasons people have challenged or wanted them banned. And the part that really irks me is the majority of those people have not read any of these books. They cannot cite or tell you anything specific about why the book should be taken off. They're just little puppets beacon off about what they've been told to beak off about. And yeah, that I found very irritating. I think in the whole year that I've been kind of looking into this and reading various articles, there was only one situation that I personally came across where the individual could actually cite the page and the sources that they found disturbing. I don't agree with what they were saying, but at least that individual took the time to read what they were making a complaint about. The majority of these other people have not. And that's what I find frustrating, is this whole push to get material out of the hands of students, or when these occur in public libraries, adults who should be able to choose what they want to consume and read, or decide to DNF if they're not enjoying it. And yet these other people who are all about, woohoo, my rights, seem to think they have the right to violate another's right to freedom of reading what they want. The final book that I read was James and the Giant Peach. Again, it was for me a reread. I'd read some other Roald Dahl books a number of years ago, but I decided to read James and the Giant Peach again. I mean, it has elements of Harry Potter. We have this young boy. There's a tragic accident with his family. He ends up going to live with his aunts who don't treat him very well. I mean, it's a fantasy, and it's just a silly story with this massive peach and a bit of magic. And I, for the life of me, cannot fathom why anyone would want to take that off the shelves. The final book will be Christine, again, Stephen King, again, a reread. And I have that on Libby to listen to it as an audiobook. Those are all the books that I read as far as the 24 in 2024 challenge. It was an interesting event to be a part of, going through the different articles. I know in terms of my own library here, I'd come across an article from 2023 related to the Freedom to Read Week and a couple of the authors appearing there. Here, our Freedom to Read Week is in February. The following month, there was an article in the paper about an individual being banned from doing a presentation at the main branch of the library because there was concerns about controversy and the topic they were speaking to. That was Joanne Woodward and her book, How Woke Won. I did delve farther into it. I actually spoke to an employee and went, do you know anything about this? They weren't quite sure about it, but they did say that perhaps it was because there was another speaker booked in the library at that time. To have both of those speakers just a couple rooms apart could have potentially caused a bit of an issue. So sadly, even with the library, you just never know when something is going to come up. And it's just an issue that very much frustrates and irritates me, especially having worked in schools for 23 years. You have resistant and struggling readers, and then on top of that, you have people who want to take away their access to books and information. It's a very difficult issue. It's one that I think people need to continue being aware of. I know for myself, it's problematic because as I go in the library, ages ago when I went into Indigo, I mean, there are fewer and fewer books available in old school hold-a-book format. There's certainly ebooks, there's audiobooks, but not everyone has the technology to be able to access that. And again, that limits who is privy to getting this type of information and enjoy that type of reading experience. And that, again, concerns me. It comes down to those who have the money and can do that have access. Those who don't are limited. And I mean, that could be a whole other video in itself. So in conclusion, yes, I will continue to be mindful of this and look into things. No, I likely won't be making any more videos about the topic other than perhaps one in February. As I say, I have my playlist, but as far as my channel, ironically, these are some of the lowest performers. The only exception was DeSantis on a thumbnail, and that one definitely got views. But I'm not sure if it's just because there are so many other banned book videos out there, or maybe people are just tired of hearing about it. I mean, there are so many things happening in this world right now, and sometimes it's just hard to stay afloat. So I did enjoy it. I think it's great that there are so many people who are involved with it, read books. And from here on out, yes, I'll continue to pay attention, in particular in my community, and be mindful of the situation. But from here on out, the books I read will be the books that I want to read for my study and my enjoyment. The irony is, many of them show up on the banned book list anyways. So I don't even have to search out whether they're banned or not. That wraps up what did I read for the banned book project. Let me know in the comments down below. Did you participate in the banned book project? Do you think there's a concern about it? Do you think people who put forward these ban a book, challenge a book, should perhaps have to read the information and cite specifically what it is they have an issue with prior to any complaint moving forward, let alone a decision about removing the book? Until next time, remember, books empower thinking. Keep thinking and take good care.